All right, good afternoon, traders. Welcome on back for another fantastic edition of our weekly workshop Traders Talk. Great to have all of us here this Monday, February 9th. Got Farzad, Leda, Uday, Nabil, Margaret, got Debbie here, got Charles, Kate, got Roger, Peter, Douglas, got Jim, you got Sam, Barbara, Mark, Joe, Sandy, Denzel, Roseanne. Got the full house here. All of our students and members just joining us here directly inside our live trading room. All of our members, though, otherwise on social. Facebook Live, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, etc. Just lower left, just popping up right there. If you're new to our channel, feed, stream, whatever you want to call it, out there on the internet streets at Cyber Trading U. Make sure to hit the follow and subscribe button down below. But I'll tell you what, though, we just killed it, or killing it, present tense, on this Wolf trade. Anyone jump in on the stack with me just before? I was in on a private with one of our students just earlier. John, we jumped in on this trade right from 16. Anyone in on this trade, though, with us here? I try and make these call outs to students if I'm in a private session every now and then. But, just a moment ago, it was a nice trade, at least the breakout of resistance. And let me ask for all our students otherwise, if you didn't have the chance to jump in, it's right place, right time, right? We're not always going to be there at the right time at our desks, finger on the trigger, ready to go. But simply enough, when a stock breaks over resistance and it runs from it after, resistance should look to flip into what? Go. Bill, Margaret, Sam, Nabil, all of us here. Support. Hey, we had a resistance this morning, 16 bucks, right? 16. You can maybe even say a little 1610, right? Give me a split moment here. Break out your snipping tool because I'm going to take a snapshot. I just want to show any of us on social media this here too, because this is where you're missing out. If you're on social, if you're not with Natalie here, Leda, Charles, you got Jen here, you got a lot of our students and members. Well, in pre-market, I was making this comments here, right? Saying at 8:23 in the morning, Wolf has higher lows on the daily chart. When a stock is making higher lows, obviously we're looking for a higher high afterwards, but the assumption is who is in control of a trade, at least if the stock is making higher lows. If the stock ain't making lower lows, who's in control of that trade, at least for that point in time? Obviously, we want to see a higher high as the end result. But all of us here, and welcome aboard, by the way, Juan, we got a few more of us here just kind of testing our room out from this past week. We got Alex, we got Paul, we got Eric, we got David, Juan as well included. Perfect. And absolutely, yeah, buyers should be in control of this trade. But going into the open, when this stock is trading at 15 bucks, 14.90, that's going to be a target at first on this trade. It's going to be a resistance at first. Now, the thought behind it is the more that this keeps getting poked at, nipped at, tested over time, not only do we get the breakout, but that's where my mind turned over to what everyone just answered to me a moment ago, where, hey, if it breaks over resistance and it runs from it after, resistance right there should look to turn into support, right? So again, join us directly inside our live trading room. And it's not always so easy to have your eyes always there. I get it. But we try and make these call outs to you every now and then. Myself and John B, one of our new gold students, John Boyd, in on this Wolf trade right now. We're looking for this to run from 16. It was all based on and predicated off of the fact that this big resistance was hopeful to flip into support, right? Now going into this afternoon, yeah, I might need to manage this trade as I'm on with you here in this workshop. It's tough to juggle everything at once, right? And that's where mainly in our phase 3 stock course, our advanced trading class, this is actually what we're just doing during a more ideal market, during a more optimal market where the program trading is a little bit more prevalent. But going into the afternoon, though, where do we have our next resistance? All of our students here inside our trading room. Again, you got Ronnie here, Sam, Nabil, you got William, who I nicknamed Bill, you got Uday, you got Bob. Who else? Any of our students here have gone through our classes. Where do we have our next resistance? Looking at Bookmap at least, right? Looking at Bookmap at least, our next resistance, 17. So I feel pretty good about this trade as of now. That's resistance on the order book. When we look at the long-term graph, though, this is a huge moment right now. So be a little mindful here of resistance still holding based on the chart. But if we just go back to like 2021, 2022, when it had IPO'd, Some stock at first just ended up brutally dropping. I'm going to start with this wick, 1620, this one here. Then the high slash open from this candle, which is really where it's at now, 1678, 1680-ish. Pretty much the combination of those two prices immediately developed as resistance across this chart. Now, you might not say that right out the gate because it just dropped. Like, okay, yeah, just obviously just made lower lows. But think about that resistance from 2021, 2022, and see where it's at now. Yeah, it's been knocking on that door. And that's actually a really good thing for today, for right now, for this week. Now, still no guarantee it's going to just rip this resistance and keep going up perfectly. But anytime that we see a stock test resistance at first, well, typically first test is best test, where it should act the strongest. It should be a strong resistance and it should reject from that level. Okay, we've seen that happen in October or the end of October, early November. Now, from that point, it's still been knocking on that door. So that's a really good thing for us here. I'm sure that we day traded Wolf back in October, November, December. I'm certain that we, day traded it, but I never really considered too much of a swing on this stock from these prices, at least until, well, perhaps today, perhaps right now. Listen, if this wants to rip the band-aid off here and just go crazy, make this giant breakout up to like 20, I'll be here for that. If it wants to prove that to me in the next 3 hours and 40 minutes, okay, then maybe I could turn a day trade into a swing trade. This, however, was meant as a day trade upon my entry. When I jumped in, this was built out as a day trade. So I do want to keep it as that generally. So what do I do in this case? We just had a whole class on this in our phase 2 stock course. And Fausto, I'm sure, drilled this home in phase 3. But we still need to see the stock make higher lows. We still need to see the stock build higher lows off the 1 minute or 5 minute candles. So even coming up, let's see if it could stay over like 1630s or so, little dip level here. If it builds out from there and goes back up, this chart's still incredibly healthy. So right now, this was meant as a day trade. But hey, if this holds nice here, if this slingshots back up in the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, wants to prove something to me more coming up, I have no problem trying to make that into a swing trade. It's just that it's not that often that I do that, right? I mean, the last one I did this on was IBRX. And obviously today it's looking kind of good, but this was kind of an anomaly here because this broke out from $3. We had a halfway decent chart level here, just saying if it could blast over resistance here from July, September, and if it stays over that, then perhaps there is a case to see a move. This obviously is a lot different in terms of chart structure and news, etc. But in relation to turning a day trade into a swing trade, if this wants to play nice from this point going forward today and holds here, then I'll test the waters. Now, in an hour and a half, 2 hours from now, if I do the afternoon meeting and this drops back down and I'm already out by then, hey, don't be surprised because this is part of my game plan. You just have to see good chart structure from this point forward. And if it's not from the 1630-ish here, I might give it down to like 1613, 1612. That is letting go of some unrealized profit. But otherwise, this was just a trade going into the late morning. I mean, on a Monday of all things, it's not really the best day to be Gunslinger McGee out there. So, listen, if I take a large chunk of this trade unrealized out and I take a smaller profit, that's fine. It's money that I still didn't have to begin with before I entered the trade. So, going into the late morning, the early afternoon, I'm not as micromanaging these trades as much as long as it's not completely putting me in the red. We got a 13,000 share order on the bid at 1625, right? All right, we'll see if it could stay over that at the least, right? Uday asking, what time did you buy the Wolf? I jumped in right here pretty much. I got in pretty much right off of that 16 level. You should see my position manager on the top right. So that shows all my current entries, what I'm in from live right now. And I got in right here at 11:43, pretty much immediately when I wrote to you in the trading room that I was looking for a move up, in private coaching. Yeah, because that timestamp was 11:43, and I got filled right here at 11:43. All right. But, hey, this wasn't so easy and perfect immediately, and it still might not be perfect where this might look to pull back down closer towards that level. So if it just weakens out from here, then it is what it is. We'll find another, fishy out there in the sea to reel in, like I kind of just jokingly say. There's going to be other stocks. There's been other stocks today, right? So we did pretty good across the board on like the UOKA trade, the PLBY, I think was holding up pretty nicely just before. I left some money on the table on LIMN, but hey, this still performed pretty well, at least in the morning. There's a reason why I left a lot of money on the table, though, for this stock, because look at where it's at now. And that's what I was kind of fearing going into the late morning here. So take your money and run if you need to. But if it's not going to flip resistance into support, if it's not going to keep with higher lows, then just run for the hills. Let's see what happens here live, even. Like I might just yank the plug on this trade even here. Could I get back in even later on today if it gives me the chance? If there's like a 200,000 share buy order that just pops up out of thin air, then yeah, I could try and jump back in on the trade if it proves something to me. But if it's not going to remain above this 1625-ish where you have a little smaller iceberg, then all right, then I might just pull the plug. We got a lot of different trades, topics, questions to cover here coming up in our workshop. I want to get into the hymns, and that was on my agenda for today. So who here heard what's going on with hymns right now? I mean, there's almost too much news that's been going on with hymns, but basically, in summation, the FDA is cracking down on non-approved semaglutide, drugs, the GLP-1 drugs, the non-approved ones. On top of that, there's some lawsuit going on with Novo and I think Hims, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Novo Nordisk files a lawsuit against Hims and Hers for infringing U.S. patent, blah, blah, blah. So they got a lawsuit against Novo. They got the FDA cracking down on their drug. And then over the weekend, they then said, okay, we're not going to make it anymore. We'll stop it. We'll stop distribution. We'll stop just creation of it. Clearly, that's not a good sign for the stock, right? Because going into the weekend, it was bad enough. There was probably already going to be more sell-off enough going into the morning based on the Novo lawsuit. Then you're telling me over the weekend, FDA cracked down. So I was very excited to see how this would open up overnight hours. It was down pretty much around like 18, around 1840-ish. So it's even lower compared to the overnight hours that it was trading within. But that's just where, hey, when a stock is coming off bad news, when it's down 10%, let alone 22% on a given day, I can't imagine the buyers being in full control of this, right? I really can't imagine this being a great buying opportunity immediately. Now, could it make a move up over time? Yeah. Are there other drugs that Hims, manufactures and produces that they can make money off of? Absolutely. Is GLP-1 like the end all be all? No, but it is the talking point for now. So, at least with that, there's a lot of big concerns about this and a lot of hesitation behind the long-term growth and future for Hims after this point. So what that means is it should take a lot of time for this long-term chart to become healthy again. Because when you look at the long-term graph, this thing has not been healthy for a little while. I mean, talk about injecting a fat drug into the chart. I mean, this basically, cut off about 50%. But it is just to say, though, that we had big support here back around 24. This is about 4 or 5 months worth of solid support. Well, it broke it even before the weekend started. Even before the weekend. Even before the FDA news came out. This was already in not great shape, right? Real brief, Sam, Bill, Uday, I'm sure. Who here is familiar with when we were trading the stock Celsius, CELH? Who here remembers when we were on a good swing trade with Celsius back in the beginning of last year? Few of us, right? And, it was just a trade. Now, I went over my whole thing on this like a long while back, and we've been long done with Celsius. Left some good money on the table on Celsius. It popped up a lot more than where I got out. So, there could have been some good money overall on this trade. Point being, though, on this is that once this broke below support here back from July and August of 23, once it broke below support here back from December of 23, Jan of 24, this thing was cooked. This thing was dead in the water, right? It took a long while for this to drop to the next support level, and it took even that much longer almost for it to bounce off that support level, right? Once it breaks below this support level here, where's our next support? Where's our next halfway decent support? You might try and force it and say around 1945, around here, 1829, here. I would probably say 13. I'd probably say this because this is the last major run that it had and crashed about like 60% plus, and then it ran all the way back up. So I would call this a better support than what you're seeing here. These are higher lows. This is like more sub minor support levels. This is a much stronger support level. It took a longer time for it to develop. So you give it that much more respect. That's just where otherwise, once it breaks this, I've seen this song and dance before. So I'm going to stay away from this as a long-term trade. If it runs up today, this week, God bless it. Let it fill the gap then. If anyone makes money on this going up, well, don't knock yourself out doing so, but all the more to you, right? But I've seen this play out. So I'm going to stay away from this trade as a long, at least until it really has some good structure within these levels. Let's say a month, 2 months happens from this point, and this is just still in this area, and it's just developed a really strong support, then maybe I'll see from there. But yeah, that's a lot of maybes right now. So let's hang back a little bit, at least for a long-term trade. Listen, if you got in from 1640 or 1648 below the day today and it's running up for you, again, God bless. But otherwise, I feel like this is going to take time to really develop. From Jim's, does Hims actually make their products themselves, or is it like a private label? Very good question. I don't know. So if anyone else here is more familiar with Hims as far as like what they do within like their manufacturing steps, let us know here, right? The more intel, the better, especially in our workshop right now when we're not, pressed against the wall looking to take a trade. So I love reading up on that stuff. If anyone has any intel on that, let me know. But yeah, either way, I mean, hey, the Hims trade I don't think is really that great. Let's just check the order book right now. If there's something incredible that pops up there, that would make me maybe think otherwise. But not really much looking that great. A couple orders popping up on the bid, like there are icebergs. But if this was 543,000 instead of 54,000, I'd be a bit more impressed. You know what I mean? So at least for the time being, it's still kind of just at the high of the day. It's pressing up against a decent level here with respect to the opening print and at least some big volume that got filled right off of 1780, 1790. But what happens when that buying pressure runs dry? What happens when that buying pressure, drops off after this, let's say, pops? Those sellers are going to take over faster than you could blink, faster than I could blink, faster than you could blink. So that's just where, hey, if this wants to rocket on up, then that would be great. But once that gunpowder runs dry, this thing will slice right back down. I'm telling you. From Uday, however, during the day, Hims has been trading up as well from time to time. Isn't it confusing? Not really. It's not that confusing. The stock is not really a great long-term graph. Sellers have been taking over. It's coming off of horrible news. It's kind of like in a way of saying when a traffic light is red, are you going 60 miles per hour through it? We don't need to make it that confusing, right? We don't need to make it that confusing. It's only confusing if you make it confusing. And what I mean by that is We don't need to think about every micro move that happens on the 1 minute chart and say, "Oh, I should have gotten in there. It moved up. Oh, stock bounced 30 cents without me right there." Is there a reason to jump in? Is there a reason to? Is there a reason to take the trade? You know what I mean? Like when a stock is coming off of incredible news, let's say like IBRX, for instance, with the whole Anktiva drug that we learned about like a few weeks ago. I might be doing something on X coming up this week, perhaps on Thursday. So if you're on social media, stay tuned for that. Kind of more of a different thing compared to normal. But otherwise, though, when this news came out with Anktiva, their drug, they got Saudi FDA approval, blah, 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 treats 2 different types of cancer. Pretty revolutionary news headline, right? Now, I learned with this company specifically is that they're actually not a small cap stock. A lot of these small cap stocks you can't trust as far as you could throw. Let's say for a small cap stock that's like a pump and dump scheme. Well, there are traders that try and short those things back down. And the reason that they do that is because long term, the graph is not good. Like even here, like overall, this still isn't as good of a long-term graph as like freaking Nvidia. You know what I mean? Brand name aside, large cap stock aside, I mean, look at Nvidia chart here. There might not be a better graph than this out there at this time. I'm sure you can go into others, but like I'm just saying, hey, with IBRX, well, when that news came out with the Anktiva drug, that was back on the 14th, and it popped the next day. That's kind of like asking, like, okay, should I short this stock here? I personally speaking, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy's worst enemy. Now, if this stock makes a lower low, different story. Even here, we talked about this just in terms of this one trade, but just like, oh, it filled the gap here. Oh, it built a support here afterwards. Well, look at where it's at now. So this chart has been very healthy since the news came out. Now, kind of comparing that to HIMS again, bad news came out here for this one. So obviously, a total flip flop of that. But then even before that news came out, this chart was looking real bad as of Thursday. It broke below this support level as of Thursday. So that's even before the even worse news came out. Don't get me wrong, it's like moving up right now at the high of the day. It could be a day trade. Is it possible it could be a day trade? Absolutely. A day trade means I'm getting out of it before 4 p.m. A day trade means I am not confident about the future of this chart long term. That's perfectly okay. I mean, hey, even just the UOKA stock. There's a reason why this is at where it's at now, right? There's a reason why this popped up to begin and completely crapped back down after. Just look at the long-term graph. You are what your record says you are, right? Just like Fausto, says from famous football coach Bill Parcells. This stock, I don't know what the float is. I'm not going to care to check. It's probably so microscopic. But I'm assuming this is some low float, low volume stock. And if it's not going to continue with higher lows, once it breaks this thing here, all bets are off. Now, until that happens with IBRX, at least I want to have some faith. Perhaps there's a chance for this to go up further. And as long as the IBRX chart is showing higher lows, I would not be in the business of shorting this thing. Now, on the flip side of HIMS, well, again, it already broke below support back on Thursday last week. Even worse news came out over the freaking weekend. So I'm sure in due time that the selling pressure is going to kick back in, and this is going to come right back down over time. Now, if this wants to prove me wrong, that's okay, because there's like 3,000, 5,000 stocks right now that are currently moving the stock market that I can't name to you, that I'm not thinking about right now at this time. My tiny little humanoid brain can't compute all of these stocks moving at the same time. Meaning, we don't need to concern ourselves about every stock out there moving in order for me to make money, in order for you, Day, Sam, Jim, Deb, Kate, Roger, Leda, all of us here to make money. We don't need to trade them all. We don't need to, have the right idea on all of them. Hey, if this wants to prove me wrong this week and it just shoots back up to 24, Cool. I'm probably day trading. I'm probably not going to swing trade, but that's okay because we're not going to be able to prognosticate and predict everything perfectly to the T. We focus on what happens more often than not. If there was ever something that offered 100% success on an everyday basis, I always like to say this: you and me both would not be doing this on a Monday, let alone inside our live trading room, even on YouTube. Doesn't matter. If trading was that easy, that it was always a 100% like perfect every day, every minute, you and I wouldn't be doing this. You and me both. So that's just where I'm pointing out that we don't need to be perfect on everything that or I'm pointing out that we don't need to have perfect anticipation of what is going to happen. We're never going to get it right every single day, every single call out, every single observation. Stocks will make a more improbable move at times. Stocks will make the more unlikely move at times. What we have to focus on with our own money is what happens more often than not, right? Even on HIMS here. Look at this. This is just bright as day here because it took a long time to build this support, but after like 2, 3 tests of it here and it shoots up, well, okay, well clearly something is going on at this $40.73. After the third test, it's like okay, clearly something is strong here. Well, if it's not making higher highs, it's probably going to make a lower low. That's what I always tell you. If it's not going to make a higher high, it's probably going to make a lower high. And what comes after lower highs? Well, lower lows. And once this smashed below this as support, if you're not getting out of this trade by at least then, real quick, folks, answer is on the chart, but answer is kind of what we discuss here each and every week. And I think that you did answer it for me in a variation just earlier. When a stock smashes below big support and it crashes, support flips into resistance. Answers on the chart, right? Simple enough. That's all we're focused on here. We don't need to make it more complicated really than that. Obviously, we're factoring in bookmap, we're looking at level 3 and level 4. That will greatly complement the long-term levels and the intraday levels at that too. But otherwise, though, it's just all I'm looking for. Some simple support flip into resistance. The wolf trade pulling back a bit. I might just need to just cut ties with this right now. Maybe just jump back in on this in a bit, shake it around a bit. I'm going to move my stop up on this if you don't mind. Just give me a sec. I'll even just get it down there a little bit lower at '09, just in case. If it just breaks a little bit lower than this, I'll just get out, just move my goalpost a little bit lower. Never really a big fan of moving goalposts, but at least nonetheless, still going to be a profit regardless. But I like that 16 level. Just either way, this needs to get back up soon. Now, otherwise, though, I did want to go over a couple of other things. Some questions that came in, at least through email just earlier. And I do want to make mention, real brief. We had just a member just kind of message me just through email just early on. I think that she lives in not Brussels, Belgium, if I'm not mistaken. The Netherlands. We're going to say the Netherlands. But one of our students, basically saying, yeah, hey, I'm not able to make it today live just due to the time zone difference. Please, folks, just realize this is recorded. This will be up on the student portal. This will be up on our YouTube just moments after. So, never, be too pressed in terms of always trying to catch it live, especially if there is like a 7, 8, 9 hour time zone difference. We got a few students, at least from around Europe, Asia, Africa, etc. I don't think from Antarctica at least yet, but we got Anna from England, we got Genevieve, I believe, from Denmark. I have to get my Nordic countries right. My apologies there, Jen. But we got a few not just from Canada and Mexico and North America, but of course all over the world. So if it's a bit tough for you to catch us live, just realize that this will be up on your student portal on our website as well as on YouTube, like immediately after. All right, here a couple good emails that just came in from before we started this workshop, so I want to get to those first. From one of our students here, I'll just say, Fausto put out a clip, like a short little video clip, a little while back about trading with a smaller account, let's say under 25,000, and mentioned one has to have a few but good trades, meaning less risk. Since a cash account only allows a few trades because they need to settle, what are the best trades, high probability to look for and when? And for my student, I'll just say, what the PS, they said, been doing well paper trading thanks to CTU. I'd love to hear that. And I kind of hit a wall going live with a smaller account, mainly due to the limitations of uh, only being able to take so many trades, more or less. That's kind of the question being asked. And Mark, your question just being asked in the chat, I'm going to get to just next. But to answer for my student here, so I will say for 2026, hopefully sooner rather than later this calendar year, I believe that they're going to be making a huge adjustment to the pattern day trade rule. I was told, at least it was long rumored, that they're going to be going from 25,000, I think, to $2,000. Like, if you have over $2,000, then you'll be deemed as a pattern day trader. That's the rumor going around the rumor mill. So if that's true, and should that play out sooner than later, then this question will long be forgotten, right? Because if you have $2,000 and that's all you need to be a pattern day trader, then granted, you're still going to take small size trades, but you're likely going to have a lot more bullets in the chamber for you to shoot. So that's something to look forward to. I don't have any updates on that just right now, Nabil. Uh, the second that we find out more, we'll let you know immediately, meaning like the morning meeting, like the next morning, we're going to just kind of discuss it once we find out more information about it. But so far, that's just a rumor. Now, let's say as of right now, well, that's not the case, right? Like as of right now, that adjustment is not being made. So, how do we still find the best trades with only taking like 3 day trades a week? Well, actually, first, let me just mention something briefly, just to kind of not necessarily correct myself, but to definitely before I keep going. So, with a cash account, you should have pretty much just 1 day in between funds settling. They had lowered the amount of days that it takes for funds to resettle in a cash account. That happened like a couple years ago. So, at least with a cash account, if you're under 25,000, you should be able to place more than 3 day trades across a given week. The issue though is that you need to have those funds resettle. So let's say you have $10,000 in your account, and on a Monday, you take X number of day trades in and out, in and out, but you go through the $10,000 worth of funds. Okay, you need to wait until those funds are resettled, and I believe that would just be until Wednesday. So you should be able to take more than literally 3 if you're in a cash account, but it has to be settled funds. So the difference between that and a margin account, let's say if you're on a margin account, well, you're given leverage, like 4-to-1 buying power, let's say. But that doesn't give you the like cash to put you over the pattern day trade limit. So the pattern day trade limit is really to say, like, let's say if you have a $25,000 account, uh, more or less, you're going to be able to be a pattern day trader. With a margin account, they're limiting you to 3 day trades every 5 days. If you're under the 25,000 and you're on a margin account, you are then limited to 3 across the week. On a cash account, you're not necessarily limited to those 3 across the week, but you have to only use settled funds. If you're using unsettled funds, you're going to get hit with like a notice immediately, like just, hey, please don't do this. And then if you still do it, you're likely going to get like flagged, get a nice little letter sent to you. But let's just say, though, in a cash account and you're under 25,000, Okay, well, as long as you're using settled funds, right? So let's just say on tiny size. With tiny size, you're able to at least have more flexibility with the number of trades that you can make. Granted, are you going to make big bucks on tiny size? No, you are not. And that has to be something that you're accepting going into it. I've had students kind of, trade on tiny size after like 3 months, and they like tell me in a coaching, like, Josh, like, I'm really upset. I'm not making enough money here. Well, yeah, obviously, you got to do the math. Like on 100 shares, if you make 30 cents a share, that's a nice trade. Let's say for like a $5, $10 stock, let's say for Wolf, be a nice trade in terms of cents per share. But does that make you real like money that could help you pay your bills? And no, and that isn't necessarily. But you're supposed to have the training wheels on trading smaller size. And if you know that going into it, then what you learn on 100 shares is going to be effective on 500 or on 1,000 in due time. So I just want to point that out. Part of that comes with perspective. Now, just to get to the point though, in terms of how do you feel better with taking certain trades? This goes back to what we preach in phase one. So, I like to say this here in Traders Talk, especially for any of us in our room, especially for students I work with privately in coaching. We don't really gatekeep anything from the classes that we share here or in coaching, right? I don't think anyone thinks that. I'm just pointing out that you can't reinvent the wheel, right? So really, like just what we hammer home in phase one and phase two, really is what we'll kind of say here. The more a stock is nipping and testing resistance, I'm expecting that breakout. I'm expecting the buyers to win the battle, right? So let's just say we see a stock already fighting at resistance, let's say for an hour and a half, 2 hours, but it's not dropping from that resistance. The damn thing is just fighting. It's making higher lows. It's holding under the level, but it's not dropping and making lower lows. If you turn over to a chart and you already see the stock, having a tough time at that resistance, but it's fighting, there's probably a reason. So the hope is to see at least, all right, maybe on the next breakout, I could try and jump in and it could lead to that run. Sometimes it doesn't even pull back. So I know this trade pulled back to 16, but a lot of times they don't. So don't be afraid to take the breakout trade. But I would just say the more times the stock is nipping and testing a resistance in a smaller set amount of time, I'll feel better about that payout. Now, conversely, if the stock already ran from resistance, then let's be hesitant then. Let's wait to try and see that flipping of resistance into a support. That's the best advice I can give. I mean, hey, for every trade that you're looking at, if you are going into it with the amount of preparation that you should, then there's going to be plenty of trades that move without you. If I were to turn over to random stock XYZ right now, Amazon, and just say, oh, figure out your levels, it's going to take some time. It's going to take, 5 minutes, figure it out. So in the 5 minutes I'm taking the time to prepare, what if the stock just starts flying? That happens, right? That could happen at any point in the day. But I always need to take the time to prepare first. So just knowing that, hey, there's going to be plenty of stocks that move without you, right? When you have that level of acceptance, hopefully it doesn't become a level of laziness or too much nonchalantness where you're letting every trade move without you and then you're just sitting here for hours without making money. We don't want to be too lazy and too nonchalant in that sense, but we do want to look at a chart and say, okay, Amazon stock obviously dropped this morning, moved back up. Where are my levels? Where were the best levels from Friday's trading? Hey, what the hell is this thing here? This thing looks like a freak of nature, this big volume spike. What's that about? Those are things that I'll look to do before I consider a trade. Now, if you're doing that already, perfect. The next step is to say, hey, we have our level set, but is there a level that the stock is being proactively stubborn with? The more times that the stock is nipping and testing that level with direction, we should be getting that better move. I mean, NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA, at least after the initial spike up this morning, otherwise, it seems like it's had a tough time, if not with 192.50, then maybe 192 specific here. I can go back on Bookmap right now if you'd want me to, but more or less, just wherever the larger volume level was on this trade, that's likely going to be the focal point this afternoon because the more it keeps knocking on that door, I'm expecting the buyers to win the battle. Now, what happens when the buyers don't win the battle, though? Like let's say for Lunar here, I had a break-even trade on Lunar, and I'm happy I got out at just that because obviously it pulled back more. But I thought that there was a case for this to run better from this 20 level. The more times it keeps nipping and testing and poking at it here, somewhere in this sequence, I jumped in right there. Okay. Well, hey, I thought it was a great entry. Why? Big level, but the stock was already fighting, and even here blasted back over it. So I thought, okay, well, listen, if it was fighting it this whole time, as long as it holds over it as support, then I'm in for a pretty decent move then. Well, it started off okay, but when it pulls back and it's certainly not making that big move shortly after, then the odds of it making a big move shortly after, just a big move against you, greatly increases. Ooh, something just happened on my book map right now. This is just kind of more internally. I think something really good just happened here. I think they fixed my long-standing issue that I've been having here. So that's nice. Now, on NVIDIA, 192. Yeah, 192 is at least the next larger volume built level from earlier today. So with good direction, the hope is at least to see continuation up to 195 for as much as it's already been fighting this. And maybe it's not even now because we typically wait going into the mid-afternoon from this point. So around like 2:30, around 3 o'clock p.m. Listen, if this keeps like kind of holding under this level, then I'd like to think should it re-break over it, at least going into 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30, we can get that better squeeze. So these are all things that I kind of just have in the back of my head to my student that had sent in that question. And that kind of just translates towards anything that we discuss here in this workshop. The easier of a level it is to see, then the more I'll be interested in trading it. When you have, Wolf in pre-market, let alone looking like this, I know where my resistance is. I know where my big level is. And when it's looking like this, it's like a beat, it's beat red pretty much, right? So, so I actually went over HIMS just a moment ago. So I saw a student just email me on this too, just from earlier. Maybe you could talk on HIMS. How can we have taken advantage, shorting it based on news levels, etc. Yeah, so HIMS, if anything, was a short, and we've been focused on HIMS as a short, but again, from the end of last week. We were focused on it as a long too, mind you, but it's been up, it's been down, and mostly down. But like here, nice drop off. Had one little bounce here going into the morning session, just day trades. But otherwise, though, going into today, it's tougher to try and capture this as a short, not because of the news that came out or the trend from the pre-market. Those are all things that would make me want to short and look for a short. But what's easy to say in hindsight is this dropped immediately, very fast. We wait the first 3 to 5 minutes irregardless. Is there a big level, not just from the chart, but from Bookmap? I went over this just before in a one-on-one, so the answer I know is yes, and we'll cover it here for a split second. But it's like the only good level that you could have really taken this from. maybe 17, but I'll go into that next. But notice here, right, shortly after the market opened up, there's like an 80,000 share print that came in. And even before that, looks like there was also like a 67,000 share print here. 67,000 plus another like almost 80,000 here. Now it's red. What do we nickname the red as, folks? We nickname it selling pressure. So, you know what? This dropped immediately here. We're not shorting it right at that point. But what would be the trigger to try and short this would be to see this move back up and flip that area into resistance. 1780, 1790. That's where you had those two larger red dots, right? This right here would have been your trigger to try and short this. Now, it needs to make lower lows, though, if you're looking for that better move. If the sellers are going to remain in control, then hey, if there's so much selling here, then we should be seeing lower highs. Okay, that's good. But lower lows, and that's what we did not get. And the more this is building up to this level, it's not to say it's a screaming buy and it's going to lead to a perfect swing trade. But the more this is making higher lows, that's not making lower lows. It's likely going to lead to a higher high, at least in due time. So, with respect to where the volume was, this was at least a good entry. Great entry at that. And you could have made some money on it. Like, listen, it dropped down like 70 cents. It's a pretty clean play. But this is just where otherwise, though, if it's not going to make that drop further, like we saw this on PayPal. We saw PayPal get crushed, and they only continued to make lower lows or lower highs at the least on the third. See? So, the difference between HIMS and the PayPal is the sheer fact that this made lower highs, then it made lower lows. The longer this is building up here, if it were to kind of build with higher lows and kind of move up, the sellers are starting to lose momentum. Now, if it doesn't make a higher high and just kind of chops, 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 and then it breaks a lower low afterwards without making a higher high, then that short trade could still work out incredibly well. And that is what happened here effectively. But just on the HIMS, hey, great entry here based on where the volume was, the selling pressure. But for as good as it started, it held higher. And that at least is a potential sign for you to try and get out. This pops back up here, you're losing some of your profit. So like I did on the Wolf going up, you want to move your stop. Like I moved my stop on this trade to basically the 1612, and it's keeping me in at least for the time being. But if it breaks below that, that's all right. I'll just get out. Just take the money and run. The difference on PayPal is that, or I'm sorry, going back to the HIMS rather, pardon me. Here just on the short, by the time it starts to curl back up around 11:43 in the morning, 11:50 in the morning, you'll likely get stopped out on this if it begins to try and pop a local higher high. It's like, okay, clearly it seems this is trying to move back up more. So good entry on the short, just didn't continue. Here, it's to say good entry on the long from 16. Is it going to continue? All right. Make sure I just go through all emails here first that came in just before we start this workshop. I did get a private chat from a student here. Just go through that before we finish. All right. All right. So last question here that just came in just before. Josh, this morning, Fausto mentioned that he was considering to average down on one of his positions. My understanding is that you should not average down. Am I incorrect? No, you generally are correct with respect to what Fausto likes and does not like. Fausto hates averaging down. Fausto will average up. Notice how I phrase that. It's not to say that he loves averaging up, but if he wants to and sees fit, he will average up on a position as a stock is moving in his direction. Um, he personally does not like averaging down one bit, hates it. And, there's just a saying where you don't want to get hurt catching a falling knife. It's basically like a last line of resort to basically lower your average cost, but you need that stock to immediately bounce. And there's a way to manage that a little bit. But if it doesn't make that immediate bounce after you do average down, you got to pull the trigger on everything, right? So it is just to say he probably didn't want to do it. Well, no, let me just actually be more firm with that. If Fausto did say he was considering averaging down, I guarantee you he does not like doing that. But, that is something that you were very much correct on, though, Michael. Like, the understanding is that you should not average down. You are absolutely correct on that. Just that Fausto likely, needed to in this one case. All right, folks. Hey, we are going to wrap up at least for the time being. I gotta refill up the old water bottle here. I've been on a hot mic since 9:30 in the morning. Going to catch a small break at least for right now. Hey, come back later on today, folks. We'll have our next broadcast at 2:30 Eastern just for the afternoon meeting. For all of us on social media, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, etc. Quick shout out later, as always. Thank you so much. Appreciate you simulcasting with us there. But if you're new to our stream channel, etc., make sure to hit the like, follow, and subscribe buttons respectively. Helps us out, but also helps you out, knowing when we go live each and every day. So hit the follow and subscribe button there at CyberTradingU on YouTube, X, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok. I like to say we're on TikTok, but we're not doing dances for you. We're here to teach you how to follow the big orders. So even going into the afternoon on the wolf trade, as long as this stays over where my stop is, I'm going to remain in this position. If this blows the roof off the place this afternoon, you never know. I might turn this into a swing. Typically I'm going to keep this as a day trade, but if this really wants to show something to me in the next 3 hours and 30 minutes or 2 hours and 30 minutes at that, then I think I'll try and consider a swing there. But, come back later on today, folks, live at 2:30 Eastern just for the afternoon meeting. Nabil, Deb, Leda, you got William, Sandy, Natalie, all of us here just joining us, Ronnie and Margaret as well. Appreciate your attendance, participation, everything included. Let me know if you have any other follow-up questions, folks. I'll be directly accessible to our students inside our live trading room. You could just private chat message me there, and I'll be able to get back to you in just a matter of minutes. All right, folks, catch you then. Take care.